Hey, so I want to take a look at Apple. Last time we looked at them was on June 11th, so it's been about a month and a half since we checked in. I know earnings are scheduled to come out soon, so uh, what I plan to do is just go through the news going back to roughly the beginning of June up through now. We'll touch on what we're kind of expecting for the next quarterly earnings, and then we'll jump into the technical analysis for this company to see what's a good price for this one. This Apple has gone from 180 from the last time we looked at this company all the way up to 190, which is new highs. So we'll just see what's kind of propelling it right now. Uh, but yeah, let's just go into the news and then we'll just carry through. So to start us off, India uh, could become a new China for Apple. So apparently, right now, India is making up about 2.5% of iPhone sales, and this could turn into about 20% of its annual growth over the next 5 years. That's what they're projecting. Uh, I've heard a lot of these Mang type stocks, so Meta, Google, and all them. Uh, a handful of them are mentioning India. And then we even have an article down here about how the US and India is expected to deepen its economic ties. It just makes me kind of interested in looking into certain companies in India if this is going to be a relationship that uh, develops over time. It's kind of just makes me think for right now. But moving on, we also have Nancy Pelosi apparently disclosed some buys of Apple. It looks like she had some call options on Apple that she exercised, which actually turned out to be like 250,000 to like $500,000. Uh, so just something we're gonna note down there. Next, we also have Apple, Google, and other tech CEOs met with Biden to discuss AI manufacturing. Uh, Basically, what they're trying to do, as far as I can understand it, is AI, of course, it's a very big buzzword now. It's kind of been for a little while now. And it's kind of, there's two factors to this. AI being so new, they want to kind of have certain precautions in place that, it doesn't cross any boundaries. But also, I have to imagine for these larger companies, such as Apple, that they want to limit potential competitors. And so if they're able to establish some sort of barrier into AI that you have to meet this qualification or have this type of funding, something like that, it could prevent potential competitors from entering the market. And that would be good for Apple. So I'm kind of leaning towards the barrier half where Apple's and the Googles are doing this to kind of help themselves, really. So on the outside, it kind of seems like it might be bad or slow down AI, but I think in the long term, it's actually going to be very beneficial for them. Uh, so, of course, we'll follow that as it kind of develops over time. Next, we have down here in the bottom left, Apple's reportedly in talks to bring Apple Card and Apple Pay to India. So, again, India's looking like something's going to be happening there. A big country, too. And then, of course, we mentioned it earlier, the US and India is expected to deepen its economic ties during this Modi visit. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. Uh, so, of course, we'll see how this evolves. It's kind of eye catching right now, this India thing. Next, we have Apple's rolling out some developer tools to create apps for its Vision Pro headset. We're going to touch on that a little more, but uh, interesting. We'll see how that plays out. I have to imagine this VR Pro headset's going to be very minor right now, but if it evolves, this could snowball into bigger things. But for right now, it's just something to kind of keep us busy. But yeah, let's just keep going. So Apple apparently topped the $3 trillion market cap. They're one of a few. So congratulations to them for that. We also have Apple manufacturing partner Foxconn. They invested about $246 million into Vietnam for factories. So again, not necessarily Apple news, but a close partner in Foxconn. They're opening factories in Vietnam. Uh, and apparently it's including one for electric vehicle parts. Apple said they would bring a car to market. Uh, we'll see if and when they do, but that's exciting. Next, we have Chinese smartphone shipments have surged more than 22% in May. So that's good. More sales. That's very good. We also have Apple boosting iCloud storage prices in several countries, including the UK. It's kind of hard to see, but it looks like if you want 50 gigabytes, it's 99 cents. 200 gigabytes, it's $3. All the way up to a terabyte's $10. Not sure how much that's going to impact this financial statements. Maybe the next quarters we'll see it grow, but I can't imagine that's going to be like a huge boost considering how large this company is. But if it does, we'll make a note of it. And then, as kind of mentioned earlier, this Apple Vision Pro, we have a little more news on that. Apple said it is treading carefully with this Vision Pro to have an appointment only launch. I believe they did this with another one of their products, but the way it sounds like to me is I guess it just kind of takes time to get a user, a purchaser, to fully understand the product or to involve the product into the Apple ecosystem. And so it's just best if you can set up an appointment to, purchase that product and, just get it set up properly. So just a unique feature there. They also are slashing their targets for the Vision Pro. Apparently they're having a couple of production issues, and so they're saying, hey, whatever people are expecting in terms of sales, just start cutting those because we're having issues. Hopefully that gets resolved, and if more updates come up, we'll be sharing that. We also have global PC shipments have dropped less than expected in quarter two as weak demand persists. And the little snippet here, we just mentioned how the global PC shipments in Q2 dropped about 13% year over year, marking the sixth consecutive quarter of contraction amid the macroeconomic headwinds. I mean, for me, on one half, this isn't a surprise. This is just, the next level in terms of the chips. I mean, that was the big deal. There's the chip shortage, and then all of a sudden, no one wanted chips because they bought them all. Well, the chips were going into things like these PCs that Apple was selling, so we're seeing it trend down. And apparently, I guess Apple hasn't reached the bottom for their PC type items, but I have to imagine it's got to be nearing the bottom. I'm kind of surprised it's not there yet, but we're just seeing that decline still play out. I don't expect that to last too much longer. Possibly by the end of the year, that'll start picking up again. But for now, it's on notice. Next, we have Apple said to have issues with its larger screens for iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max. I can't imagine that's going to last too long, but it's a cause for concern at the moment. Hopefully that gets resolved quickly and, doesn't hold up production too much, if at all. We also have Apple may pull its iMessage FaceTime from UK if a controversial security bill passes. And so the note that we have here is UK wants to scan encrypted messages. Apparently iMessage and FaceTime utilize that type of feature, and UK is like, we want to read those messages just in case, for security purposes. But Apple feels like that's a breach of privacy, and but they might just remove the apps from the UK. I don't think it'll go that far, but it looks like Apple's prepared to do it if it comes to that point. And lastly, before we shift into the expectations for our quarterly earnings, is Apple gains, as it's said to have built a chat GPT style bot for employees. And then the little note here is just how Apple's Ajax, that's the software they're using, is built on Google Jax, uh, and the company system runs on Google Cloud, its own infrastructure, and Amazon's AWS. Uh, Overall, it just sounds like they found a way to streamline certain procedures and just make things a little quicker for their employees. And if the employees are quicker, they can get results faster. It should just increase productivity. So overall, a good thing. I don't think that necessarily would be worth a big jump in stock, but definitely worth mentioning, and that's why I bring it up. But let's pivot into what we can expect. We're still about a week away, I believe. Earnings are August 3rd, so yeah, a little over a week. But for right now, what we're expecting is Apple to post earnings of $1.20 per share for the current quarter, which isn't a change year over year. The current fiscal year for consensus earnings is projected to be $6, which would be a minus 1 to 2% change from the prior year. The next fiscal year, the consensus earnings estimate is $6.62, which would be a 10% increase from a year ago, meaning this year, which would be $6. So we'll see if that plays out. We will be tracking those numbers, see if they hit. These should be pretty much in line, considering we're, as I mentioned, about a week and a half away from actual earnings. So because we're so close, these should be pretty in line with what we will see. It's more so we want to see if that $6 mark is reached by the end of the year. And then, of course, if that $6.62 mark plays out over the next year. In terms of actual revenue, that's here on the right side. So for the sales estimates for the quarter, we're expecting $81 billion, 81.21 to be exact, which would be a year over change of negative 2%. So it's actually gone down a little bit. Still relatively flat, which, considering how large Apple is, that's kind of expected. They're not really a grower anymore, even though they've definitely been on an uptrend lately. In terms of revenue, they just don't grow with the, large percentages like they did in the past or these other newer companies. The current and next year fiscal years. So for the current year, we're expecting roughly $384 to $385 billion. Then for next year, they're thinking like $409 billion. So for the full year of this year, roughly down about 2 to 3%. But then the year after, it's projected to go up about 6 to 7%. So we're going to save this and we'll follow it, see if this kind of plays out as projected. Probably won't be exact, but if we're in the ballpark, that'll be a thumbs up for this. We also have reported revenues of $94.84 billion in the last reported quarter, which that also was a minus 2.5% change. Earnings per share from that last quarter was $1.52, which was no change from the prior period or the prior year. Consensus estimate of $93.3 billion. And then earnings per share surprise was about 5 to 6%. Over the last 4 quarters, Apple surpassed the consensus estimate 3 of the 4 times. But it looks like if there's a surprise in terms of earnings, it looks like, number one, they're going to exceed the expectations. But if they do exceed, it's not going to be by much, maybe like 5%, which, for Apple, that is a large figure, but percentage-wise, it really shouldn't impact them that much. But we'll keep track. We'll see if they're able to hit these figures as we actually get the earnings report. But now let's pivot into the technical analysis here. So I mentioned it earlier that we looked at them on June 11th, which that was, I take it, a Sunday on this little red bar here. So that was the end of the week, roughly at 180, which is what our tracker here shows. Since then, we've really just continued this uptrend, which is that purple in between the purple lines. That's the uptrend range that we've noticed. We're still in that. And before we go any further, I think it'll be best if I just share what we were seeing before. And so here we have the earnings date, but so on June 11th, we were seeing it trading at 180. We had buy points all the way down to 146 and 175. 146 was my point of interest, because it had some support to back it up, but we had 175 mark because that was most likely that was the bottom of the uptrend, and we had resistance at 180. I believe 180, if we just take a moment to circle back, 180 was previous all-time highs. I thought it might struggle to pass that mark, and it kind of did. I mean, the week before, it got slightly over 180, or that black line. The next week, it went above, mostly it traded above that point, but ultimately, at the end of the week, still at 180. And then it just continued on as the uptrend continued. It didn't really pause like I thought it might. It definitely did at 172 for a little bit longer than at 180, but still, that was a point of interest for us at 180. But it blew right through that, so that'll most likely get updated. And then we also had this note where we said a short-term uptrend was developed in January of 23. That is definitely still active. We noted to buy the dips on this, and that it has reached new all-time highs. All those appear to be true still, but let's just kind of dig into it, see if we want to change any of these figures. So right off the bat, and it was also red here because I didn't like the price at the time. And just looking at it again, yeah, I thought it might get rejected at 180. I wasn't sure if the uptrend would continue on. It might stall out. Based on the news, just in general, nothing really is catching my attention in terms of pushing this one forward. The VR headsets, that's really the only thing. The India idea, that has potential, the whole India thing, especially if they only have 2 to 3% of their sales from India. If that can grow to 10 times more, there's potential there. It's just, how long will that take? But that's really the only growth opportunity I'm seeing with this one, and maybe that's what other people are seeing too. We'll see what they say in their financial earnings. Very curious about the India thing. But yeah, so it was at 180. Since then, we're now at 191. So I'm going to update that. The buy points, so if I just scroll out a little bit, we had 146, and that is this green line down here. That was just noted because in the early stages of this uptrend, for whatever reason, it kind of hung out at this point. It pulled back a couple times, but didn't want to go below 146. And I suppose more recently, we could say it traded a lot around about 172. So there's some support there. We could also argue that for 180, but 172 seems like a more logical choice, only because there was 4 weeks where it hung out around 172, 174-ish. And 180, it really just kind of pushed right through that, not really stopping, just backing up. There's not really much support that I'm seeing beyond the 146. I mean, we have this downtrend here. It didn't really slow down at all. It definitely popped around 150. We could put that in, but if anything, I would say that might be a fair valuation type line. So for us, that's a blue line. So I guess I could put that in just so we can say we marked it or noted it. And I'll put that in. That's a pretty decent spot. And again, I'll make it blue because it's not really a buy point or a resistance point, but it's just a point of note that we're seeing a little bit of support, but also some resistance here, and even here in that uptrend, it kind of struggled to get above 153. Anything higher, though, I'm not really seeing much support. Uh, so that's kind of worrisome, only because if this one starts to pull back in a major way, so from like where it is at 191, if it all of a sudden, say, broke below 172, which I what I'm going to do is put a very faint green line. I'm going to put it in so we can see it, but it's not going to be it, it's going to be very light. Uh, so I hopefully that it's visible on your side. It's visible on my side, but it's a very thin line as opposed to a thicker line that pops out. But I'm putting that in there right up against our red line of resistance because we had about 4 weeks, roughly a month back here in May, where it kind of consolidated a little bit. It slowed down and then it continued on. So I'm going to put that in just for reference. So if this did pull back, 172 is probably a point that I'd look to add to this one. And if it kept pulling back, yeah, it might pull back all the way to 146. But for right now, that uptrend's still intact. Nothing's in terms of the news. I didn't see anything bad. Yeah, there was a couple issues with, the iPhone 15 with the screen, and a couple production issues with that Vision Pro headset. But I don't feel like that's enough to really slow this down. I guess the global PC market, it was really split, and I think that's why we're seeing it kind of pull back a little bit or slow down. Um, so I guess going back to the question here, a buy point for this one, um, I'm gonna add in. I'm gonna I'm gonna leave in 146, so that's down here, and I'll make this actually a thicker line for us, just so it's a little more visible to see. Um, I'll leave that in, but that's not going to be my main point of interest. I'm going to add in 172, so I'm just going to change 175 to 172. And if this uptrend continues, based on where it is right now, it would be 185. 185 would be like the very bottom of that uptrend while maintaining it. So just kind of forecasting this out roughly a month, because that's when I'm estimating I'll circle back to this, maybe sooner, but around the 18th, we'll say, of August, if we were to catch the bottom of the uptrend, it would be at about 192. So I'll put that in there also. But for me, the buy point right now, I'm going to say is 172. That would be like the point that I'm interested in most. And then in terms of a sell point, or resistance, I should say, we had 180. I thought it would kind of struggle a little bit to get above previous all-time highs. It has not. So if anything, maybe 194. Clearly it stopped there, but it also kind of went above our uptrend. So maybe that's all that happened. It got a little ahead of itself. It pulled back into the range, and now we're just going to continue forward. If that's kind of the case that we're dealing with, and that uptrend's still going to be intact, the resistance point right now, or I guess going into next week, is about 199 is the top of the range, and similar to what we did before, if we just go out to roughly mid-August, the top of the range would be about 205. So I'm going to put in 205 as my only point of resistance right now, and I'll update the date to today. And then, of course, our note, that short-term uptrend, that is still in effect. Buy dips, yeah, that's still true and has reached new all-time highs. That is still true, too. It's definitely pulled back. I guess technically it reached like 198 at one point, so it's not exactly its all-time high, but you can see it's still making newer highs. So we'll leave that in too. And that pretty much wraps this up. So let me just do a quick recap and then we'll close out. So Apple, I guess I'll update this one to a blue. Blue again is like fair value. And the reason I'm going to change it to blue is if I look at this uptrend chart, it's more or less right in the middle. And that kind of warrants a blue market this time. If it was down at the bottom, probably would get a green. If it was at the top, like it was back here, it would get red. So the fact that it's right in between, I'll give it a blue, and that's really all there is to that. But quick update here, or the recap. So it's currently trading at 191. The buy points I have are 146, 172, and 192. Again, 192, I just want to remind us that that is projecting out a month. So if it was trading at 191 a month from now, yeah, that would probably be a good deal, considering it probably consolidated for a little while, and we're going to imagine it's going to keep going up. Things could change between then and now. That's why my bolded point is 172. I would like to see it pull back and hang out at that range. I think that's fair. So that's why it's in bold, and that's my point of interest. And then resistance is at 205, similar to the 192. The exact top of the range, I believe this week was something like 194 or something, but projecting it out a month, roughly. Again, that's when I'm anticipating circling back on this. It'll be, the top of the range will be roughly at 205, and so that's how that point was chosen. We updated the date here, and then the note that short-term uptrend since January of this year still in play. Buy dips. I'm still planning on doing that if it dips to the bottom of the range. I don't think this uptrend is going to last too much longer. Could be wrong. Please let me know your thoughts on that if you don't agree with that. And has reached new all-time highs. That is continuing to happen pretty much every week, every other week. They're reaching a new all-time high, so that is staying in also. But yeah, that wraps this up. So again, if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them if you leave it in the comments, or if you just want to share your opinions or any kind of insights that you saw, especially over the past month. Be very curious to read that. But again, that wraps this up. So please like, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.